Welcome back, everybody, to the Expression of Love podcast, and welcome back to Become Your Own Breakthrough. If you do not break through with this video, then I will for you, because, man, do I have a video for you. Starting off, I just want to first emphasize that I do not intend to dehumanize the person hosting this video that I'm going to react to. I do not mean also to dehumanize George Floyd as a person, because we're also going to be talking about George Floyd. The person that hosted this video I'm going to react to was doing a hit piece on a documentary put forth by Candace Owens, the GOAT, if you will. And this person doing the hit piece on the video, aside from his outright disrespect of Candace and the great amount of work that went into the video, as well as the forensics person that came in and gave some of his argument in support of the overdose that George Floyd experienced, leading to his untimely death. But he also was just so sloppy in the way that he put together his argument, and so ridiculously misinformed when it comes to how investigative journalism actually takes place, and so biased to the leftism that has poisoned his little young mind. I actually feel bad for the guy, and I hope that one day he or people that follow him see this video. I hope that he one day sees this video, or he or people like him sees this video one day, because it's just so unfortunate when you have people that have so much passion and so much potential to do good, and they just waste it on being for the left, which if you haven't been living under a rock, you know the left is promoting child mutilation by the medical industry. They are promoting hypersexuality of children. They are promoting divide and conquer, racially charged divide and conquer tactics in both the so-called mainstream media, as well as the school system, like the school curriculum in public schools. The left is on the wrong side of history. Leftism is a poison that attacks the mind and cages the mind and promotes echo chambers, and all of the bad things about humanity always come from leftism. So anyway, it's a horrible tragedy that this young man has dedicated his life, it seems, to being a pundit for the wrong side of history. But it does provide opportunity for us to tell the truth. And so that's what I intend to do with this video. And of course, at the end, I'll insert my inspirational message about becoming your own breakthrough, because this does provide us with a great opportunity and something to be happy about and something to look forward to in the near or far future. So let's dive in, shall we?
It said that he didn't have any bodily harm that would cause him to suffocate to death.
They hit him with the fentanyl. The guy's knee wasn't even on his neck like that.
There was a ton of evidence that George Floyd consumed a toxic, lethal cocktail of fentanyl and methamphetamine.
It is the year of our Lord, 2022, and you guys are still saying the same played-out bullshit from 2 years ago. And for that, I'm about to eat through your shit. For any of you ask, yes, I did. It's an hour, 18 minutes that I'll never get back. It features Candace speaking to 13 distinct people, and it's one of the worst, weakest attempts at investigative journalism I've ever seen in my fucking life. Oh, and I also read the autopsy. Here we go.
Okay, so first point, she's much older than you. Have some respect. Second of all, as you can see from the man with the glasses, he said there is a ton of evidence supporting the notion that a lethal dose of fentanyl and methamphetamine was ingested by Mr. Floyd. What does that mean? That means that there is a case to be made for this. This is not parroting something, some archaic notion. This is stating a fact. There is a ton of evidence suggesting that the jury may have made the wrong decision based on social pressure because of the criminal activity that was happening in the streets, as well as the collusion and corruption that was happening on behalf of the court system and corporatocracy in the country. Evidence, not a conclusion. There's evidence to support a hypothesis. This is what he said. And this delusional young man who is obviously angry that there may be evidence going against what he really, really, really wants to be true, decides to take it upon himself to say that, oh, you're still repeating what they said 2 years ago in the trial? Yes. But I digress. Let's keep going.
The part that y'all keep thinking is helping you isn't helping you. When it says no life-threatening injuries identified, that means nothing external or internal that was broken, torn, or damaged that would have caused death. This does not mean that what they set up here isn't what happened. Much in the same way that if I suffocated you with a pillow, even though I had to apply force to your face, I didn't break or tear or cause any internal damage that would have caused you to die. I just took your air away.
Okay, and here we go with some substance, or what would pass for substance for those of us that really don't pay much attention. He pulls out the autopsy, which I am also going to pull out, and then he points out when they were doing the autopsy or performing the autopsy, there was no injuries to the neck or basically anything dealing with breathing. There was no injuries there. And he says, because I can suffocate you with a pillow and you could die from suffocation and there wouldn't be necessarily injury in the autopsy, that means that this clearly is an argument that doesn't work, because it was the knee on, is what he's implying is it was the knee on the neck, because that's what he points to at the top, the top of the autopsy, as we can see here. Top right here says cardiopulmonary arrest, right? Cardio, that's heart. Pulmonary, I'm not sure what that is. Arrest, complicating law enforcement subdual, restraint, and neck compression. That does not say. And just to clarify for you all, it basically means that his heart and lungs stopped. Well, cardiopulmonary arrest means his heart stopped. That's what it means. So I just wanted to clarify, because as I was doing this live, I had no idea what it was. And we end up saying this later, but I just wanted you to, keep up with the facts as we go through it live. So here, back to your regularly scheduled programming. It does not say suffocation, does it? It says cardiopulmonary arrest, which let's go ahead and look that up. First, let me copy it, because I don't know how to spell that off the top of my head. Cardiopulmonary arrest. Sounds like something dealing with the heart, but let's see. Cardiac arrest. Well, we know what that is. We know what that is. And this is the autopsy report. Cardiopulmonary arrest, complicating law enforcement subdual. So this young man pulls out the autopsy report after claiming that what Candace Owens and her team put together as a documentary was the worst form of investigative journalism that he's ever seen in his effing life, right? He pulls out the autopsy report. It ignores most of the words in the stated cause of death. Let me see. In the case title, not cause of death, in the case title, and just focuses on neck compression and quickly jumps off of the shared screen. Pardon me, it says share screen on Zoom, so that's what I'm going to use. You know what I mean, where he had the autopsy in the background. He claims this is the worst investigative journalism he's ever seen. Look, it says right here, neck compression. Well, it also says cardiopulmonary arrest, which is cardiac arrest. But let's continue looking at this autopsy report. Okay, so as you can see here, in terms of blunt force injuries, there was blunt force injury to the forehead, face, and upper lip, and the mucosal injuries of the lips. Basically, shoulders, hands, elbows, legs, contusions, all of the small blunt force injuries that happened when George Floyd was resisting arrest and trying to pull his hand, his wrists really hard against the handcuffs that he was already in, as well as struggling and pushing away from or pushing himself into the officers and the door entrance of the car, because he was trying really hard not to get in the car. So that's the blunt force injuries. And here's something that is very, very, very interesting, why this young man, who claims that he read the autopsy, which I highly doubt, here's something that he should not have ignored. Natural diseases, right? It's the autopsy of George Floyd. What does that say? Arteriosclerotic, that has to do with your arteries, arteriosclerotic heart disease, multifocal, severe. Also, hypertensive heart disease, cardiomegaly with mild biventricular dilation, and clinical history of hypertension. So not only did he have a clinical history of hypertension, but he had cardiomegaly, which we'll get to also later in this video, because he brings that up in his TikTok. Natural diseases, dealing with the heart. And what does it say at the top? Cardiopulmonary arrest, cardiac arrest. And what could have caused cardiac arrest? Well, maybe paranoia and anxiety mixed with a police interaction where you think you're going to go back to jail, mixed with a lethal dose of fentanyl and methamphetamine in your system all at once. Nothing dealing with a knee on your neck, but let's keep going, right? No life-threatening injuries identified. So no facial, oral, conjunctival. I'm not sure what pediche or pedichie even means, but no injuries of the face or the mouth or anything up here. No injuries of anterior muscle of neck or laryngeal structures. Scalp, soft tissue, or skull. He wasn't bashed in the head or shot in the head. No, and this is interesting. No chest wall soft tissue injuries, rib fractures, other than a single rib fracture from CPR, vertebral column injuries, or visceral injuries. What does this tell me? No chest wall soft tissue injuries or rib fractures. That tells me that the weight that Derek Chauvin was putting on him was not enough to cause any chest wall soft tissue injuries or rib fractures. Right? We know that his knee was not directly on his neck, and we know that some of the claim was that he was using his body weight to stop the breathing of George Floyd. Well, George Floyd is a very muscular person, and when your anxiety is up and your adrenaline is running, your resistance to things like being choked and something stopping your breath is heightened, right? So he's a strong, 6'4" strong brother with super high anxiety, drug-induced adrenaline, and all of that going off, sirens going off, to where he's crying and reacting to the police in very frantic ways. He can't breathe for some reason, but his can't breathe has nothing to do with his chest wall soft tissue or his ribs being pressed up against by Derek Chauvin's knee so hard that it's causing him not to be able to breathe. Very interesting, or at least that's what I gather from this. I could be wrong, but this is what I gather from this, that there was no super hard pressure put on this man's back to where he wasn't able to wouldn't have been able to breathe had he not just ingested over 11 nanograms per milliliter of fentanyl and just under 20 nanograms of methamphetamine, which is a normal dose. So a normal dose of meth and a almost 4 times the average lethal dose of fentanyl. And then incision and whatever that is, subcutaneous dissection of posterior and lateral neck, shoulder, back, flank, and buttocks, negative for occult trauma. All right. Viral testing, nothing. Hemoglobin, nothing. Toxology. Now this, of course, this young deranged brother was not going to bring this up. This is the toxology report. Fentanyl, 11 nanograms. The average overdose dosage for fentanyl is about 3 nanograms. So if it were 12 nanograms, then he would have 4 times the average overdose amount. Okay. Then there's this 5.6 nanograms of what's called norfentanyl. I have no idea if it's the same synthetic opioid as regular fentanyl, but there's 2 fentanyls here, one 11 nanograms and one 5.6 nanograms. Very interesting. I wish I looked up what this was. You know what? Let's just do a quick search and see what the hell is that. The sensitivity of 5 fentanyl. So it's another type of fentanyl. So actually, it wasn't just 11 nanograms. It was 16.6 nanograms. If 3 nanograms per milliliter in your blood is the average overdose, then 16.6, let's see, 15 would be 5 times. Do you see why this angry little boy makes no sense? I hope you do. But let's keep going. Some THC, some cottonine, I don't know what that is, some caffeine, and the 19 nanograms per milliliter in his blood of methamphetamine, which so far that I've seen is 20 nanograms is a normal dose that tells people that you have it in your system. So he took a normal dose of meth and he took this much fentanyl. All right. And please excuse my if you feel like me looking up the norfentanyl was not thorough enough for you to be convinced, look it up yourself, leave a comment, let me know where I went wrong or what I got wrong. I would love to learn. His blood was negative for stuff, drug screen, urine drug screen, presumptive positive for cannabinoids, fentanyl, amphetamines, methamphetamines. And then it says morphine free. I'm not sure what that is. 86 nanograms. So it's very, very interesting that this I'm going to the here we go, evidence of injury. It's very interesting that that all of this was left out when he tried to get spicy by bringing up the autopsy report. But there's one more thing I want to bring to your attention here before moving on, which is that for the evidence of injury in the head and neck, there's abraded red, black, and purple contusions on his left brow. That's his face. There's some for his forehead. There's some on his left cheek, left corner of his mouth, and superior to the right side of his upper lip. So, and then here we go. Right side of his nose, still on the face. Left nares, it's still your nose. pink purple, mucosal abrasions and lacerations on the upper lip and lower lip. This is the entire evidence of injury list for his head and his neck. And they have things as small as 0.2 centimeter maximum dimension red abrasions on the right side of his nose. What does this mean? That means that in the entire report of the injury evidence on his neck, nothing, not even the slightest, tiniest bit of evidence for injury came up. Now, why is this significant? In regard to his argument that, well, I can suffocate you with a pillow, or, you know, basically by holding your nose when you're asleep. Why is this it's significant? Because he was not being suffocated by a pillow in his sleep. He was wide awake. There was air all around him. He requested to lay on the ground. As you can see, if you watch the documentary, I may be able to find the clip. Put it in here, but he requested to be on the ground himself. That was his request. He said, put me on the ground. Let me lay on the ground. Put me on the ground, to the police officers, and they obliged his request because he wouldn't get in the car. He was claiming he was claustrophobic, and that's why he didn't want to get in the car, when that doesn't make any sense, because when the police pulled up on him, he was in the driver's seat of a car and he drove. So so anyway, he was breathing. He was not sleeping with a pillow held up to his face. This was the claim is that Derek Chauvin killed this guy with his knee on his neck. That's the claim. And that's why it's important to not ignore when somebody says, oh, well, when you look at the report and it says that, you know, there was no evidence of injury to the neck. Well, I can suffocate you without causing injury to your neck. Yes, you definitely can do that in a bunch of different ways. But if your claim is that somebody's knee, a grown man's knee, was on your neck and the ground was on the other side for 8 minutes and 40 some seconds, and that's what killed you, there would be injury to your neck. There would be evidence that that is what killed you. There's no evidence that that is what killed him. There's a cell phone footage and the body cam footage from the officer and the story that that's what killed him. There's no actual scientific evidence that that is what killed this man. And that's what's important to note. Let's get back to our reaction, shall we?
Half the jury believed that it was a neck restraint, it was the knee on the neck.
My first thought was, who is this guy and what's his credibility? Seeing as they deliberately don't show it in that clip that they posted on the Daily Wire. Did a little Googling, it turns out this is Dr. Ron Martinelli, a forensic criminologist and a certified medical investigator. I guarantee 90% of the people who watched this documentary turned their brains off when they saw that, but I kept looking. Turns out the one guy they got is a regular contributor to OAN along with Michael Knowles. OAN being a far-right pro-Trump news network. Also,
look at that. And here we go. He said, far-right, pro-Trump, quote, news network. Donald Trump was the president of the United States. There won't be any news networks that are pro-Trump. That makes absolutely no sense, unless you're a leftist, where everything needs to come from the left side of things, or it's automatically wrong. So his first claim to this doctor not being credible, this forensic doctor not being credible, is that he contributes content or contributes somehow to a right-leaning news network, to a right-leaning news content producer, if you will. Why does the political affiliation decrease credibility? Newsflash, it doesn't. That's your opinion because you have no idea what you are doing. It wouldn't be your opinion if you actually did investigative journalism, like you claim Candace is not able to do because she's producing the worst investigative journalism you've ever seen in your effing life. The disrespect to someone who is leagues above his caliber in his ability to present evidence and make a compelling argument. Anyway, so he's attempting to discredit the forensic doctor's work by saying, well, he's right leaning and he contributes to a Trump supporting news network. Well, news networks support Donald Trump, and there are going to be news networks that not only support him, but also defend him when baseless claims like he's a racist, he's a sexist, he's a pedophile, they will come to his defense if there's no evidence to prove that those things are true. And that doesn't diminish the credibility of the news site. That just reveals that the news site is not going to go with the leftist agenda. But let's keep going.
So it turns out the one guy they got has published an entire book called The Black Lives Matter Movement and the War on Police. Also, the fucking one guy they got happens to be the CEO of a consultation firm whose literal fucking job it is to provide expert testimony in court in support of police officers.
All right. So now he has a problem that the forensics guy is the CEO of a company whose job it is to provide support for police officers. Why would there not be a company or multiple companies that provide support for police officers? Why would that not be in existence if people lie about police? And trust me, people do lie about police. Look back into Mike Brown's shooting. Mike Brown was punching the police officer in the face when he was shot, and he was reaching for the officer's gun when he was shot. And yet the whole public and all of the left-wing media was screaming, was pushing the narrative that he had his hands up and he was surrendering, and he was screaming, "Don't shoot," because his brother lied on the police. Let's continue.
The damn one guy they got happens to be wearing a thin blue line, Blue Lives Matter flag pin in the damn interview. This is the shit y'all been hyping up.
Yeah. Somehow he's only credible if he goes against the police, or if he's not in support of police. I digress. The pin on the man's jacket does not lessen the credibility, and nobody is hyping up anything but the evidence. The evidence is what's being hyped up. The fact that this man is competent is part of the evidence that that's being hyped up. This man is competent at doing his job. You know, one of the biggest differences between leftists and conservatives is the fact that leftists really, really care about your group identity. If they can identify something that's similar between you and another person they don't like, a leftist will claim that you are the same as the person that they don't like, right? Like, if I say we should build the wall, they're going to say, oh, you're a Trump supporter. And what they mean is you're like the worst depiction of a Trump supporter that has ever existed or will ever exist. Meaning if someone that does something even more horrible than the worst Trump supporter has ever done shows up in the future, then now you have switched to being like that person from being like the last worst person. And this is evident in the way that they talk about things, right? Like former Vice President Joe Biden, he says that, quote, MAGA Republicans are extremists and a threat to our republic. He's using a group identity and pulling out the fact that there are some extremists who are on the right and saying MAGA Republicans are extremists and people are being killed. An 18-year-old was killed by a vehicle by somebody who thought he was an extremist, right-wing extremist. A 41-year-old demon ran this 18-year-old over for being a Republican. And yet this is the side of history that this young Black man and a whole lot of Black people champion. This is the side of history that you all want to be on and promote and want your children to be on and want your children's children to be on and want to vote for. This is the side of history that you promote. It makes absolutely no sense, and it makes you look horrible. But let's keep going with our reaction.
It's worse.
3 grains of fentanyl on the head of a lead pencil, enough to kill you, enough to kill me. And so they had to continuously inculcate the public to believe that Derek Chauvin intentionally, premeditatedly murdered George Floyd, and drugs had absolutely nothing to do with it.
Get ready, because this is about to get real crazy. So let's go over the claims, shall we? George Floyd consumed a lethal amount of fentanyl, except for the fact that Dr. Martin Tobin, a lung and critical care specialist, testified that his breathing did not reflect that of an overdose, and Dr. Bill Smock, an expert on deaths from asphyxia, backed up that testimony. Then forensic toxicologist Daniel Essenschmidt revealed that there's been tests of over 2,000 people driving under the influence of fentanyl with concentrations around or higher than Floyd that have survived. And Dr. Andrew Baker, the person who did the autopsy, put in the autopsy that his heart and lungs stopped in the setting of being restrained by police with neck compression. While underlying health conditions could have contributed to it, it wasn't the top line cause of death. Much in the same way that if you were 65 and a smoker with diabetes just walking around one day and then you caught COVID, if you then died, while it wouldn't be the best thing that you had all those underlying conditions, the COVID still killed you. And he wasn't even on his neck like that. Except for the fact that he lost consciousness 5 minutes in. The footage used by Chauvin's lawyer at trial and in the documentary both were after the point he lost consciousness.
Okay, so let's take this piece by piece. First of all, in this testimony that he pulls up, and by the way, this AP at the top left, we're going to get into what Associated Press is all about in just a moment. But let's take this piece by piece. This says here, a healthy person subjected to what Mr. Floyd was subjected to would have died. Well, there have been countless videos on YouTube. You can look them up yourself. I guess the most famous one would probably be the other person that I call the GOAT. His name is Steven Crowder. Steven Crowder did this experiment with, he laid himself on the ground with his hands behind his back, restrained, and he had his friend put his knee on his shoulder very, very close to his neck on the side for longer than the time that George Floyd was on the ground. He was, not only was he relatively healthy, but he has a heart condition.
And by the way, I have been talking this whole time, and in case people wonder, I talk really fast, and I have a heart condition.
Yeah.
It's a chest condition where my bone grows into my heart. I have to get surgery in July. The point is,
Sounds like Alf.
the point is that this is probably more difficult for me than it is for a lot of you out there watching, but I also don't have 4 times the lethal dose of fentanyl in my system.
That's
and
true.
again, I'm
30
just laying
seconds.
down because this is more comfortable. No, I can still get up. I can switch my face. It's more comfortable for me to lay
And so
my
did
head
George
down.
Floyd, by the way. He did pull his head up and move his head
Yeah.
around. So
So anyway, this has been proven not true, and that's enough evidence for me to know that this was a person who was simply using their title as a doctor to manipulate the data or to manipulate the story in a way that they can insert one lie in the midst of a bunch of truths just to make sure that the big lie of the story, that Derek Chauvin is the one who is a murderer and murdered George Floyd in cold blood, is what's accepted by the public. But a healthy person subjected to what Mr. Floyd was subjected to would have died. If you give them the drugs, the amount of drugs that George Floyd had, and all of the anxiety from being a repeat offender and knowing that he's getting ready to go back to jail and all of that, if you include all of that, maybe, but most likely not. But let's take this next piece of evidence here. This is the one where he said that his breathing did not reflect the breathing of someone who just overdosed. And this is just total malarkey. And again, this AP, Associated Press, just keep in mind that this is who we're dealing with. Okay, there are liars in the media and there are liars in the national media. Tobin said that he analyzed Floyd's respiration as seen on the body camera footage, okay, the body camera video, and explained that while fentanyl typically cuts the rate of respiration 40%, Floyd's breathing was right around normal just before he lost consciousness. Not only does this leave all of the room needed for his breathing to become extremely abnormal after he lost consciousness, but it also doesn't take into account the anxiety and the adrenaline that was rushing through his body because he was in this situation while extremely high on this drug. This wasn't somebody sitting in their room doing a lethal dose of fentanyl by themselves in a not stressful environment or a not stressful situation that is directly impacting them and their own body. Okay, this was somebody who was dealing with police. That he didn't want to deal with police, and he was crying, and he was uh, not hallucinating, but he was hyper. Okay, he was hyper. His adrenaline was rushing. All of that. So his respiration being right around normal in this particular situation means absolutely nothing for him, means nothing to me. And then if it cut after he lost consciousness, if that's when it was, you know, cut 40%, the normal rate, then that's because there was no longer the hormones being released, the adrenaline and all of that influencing his overriding of what fentanyl does to the body. And the overdose probably had a lot more room to go ahead and do its job and take him out. This makes sense to me. Again, I'm not a doctor, but I know what Associated Press is all about. Then I have symptoms of fentanyl overdose, such as constricted pupils and decreased breathing. He didn't have constricted pupils and decreased breathing. Yet he had the biggest the biggest part, he had the severe heart problems, and he had over 5 times the average lethal dose of fentanyl in his system, plus a regular dose of methamphetamines, which, if that is going to, I don't know, but if that slightly changes what happens in terms of your pupils or whatever in your body, because you're now mixing drugs. He had the 5.6 nanograms of the norfentanyl, he had 11 nanograms of regular fentanyl, and he had the 19 nanograms of methamphetamines, which, as I looked up, you know, so far, again, correct me if I'm wrong, is a regular dose of meth. So he did meth and 2 types of fentanyl, bringing them to 16.6 nanograms of fentanyl. Average lethal dose of fentanyl is still 3 nanograms, which nobody here argued against, which is why investigative journalism was needed to make this movie and to make the claim that George Floyd did not die from Derek Chauvin's knee on his neck. Anyway, this liar says this is not a fentanyl overdose. That is somebody begging to breathe. You have to be able to breathe to beg for anything. And he was screaming that he couldn't breathe before he was put on the ground, again, per his own request to be put on the ground. He was saying, I can't breathe, when they were almost successful in getting him in the squad car. He was saying, I can't breathe. So this I can't breathe stuff was not due to Derek Chauvin. And I think that's probably the most important part of the I can't breathe side of this story, is I can't breathe, quote from George Floyd, his dying words, rest in peace. I can't breathe was being stated before he was on the ground.
I can't breathe, I know I can't breathe. I had COVID, man. I can't breathe.
He was saying that because he didn't want to get in the car. I can't breathe. And if he's saying I can't breathe, then maybe the fentanyl is cutting his respiration 40%, but his muscles are just making it seem like he's not, because his adrenaline is rushing. He feels like he's about to die. He's very, very, very afraid. He feels like he's getting ready to go back to jail. He doesn't want to go back to jail. All of these things happening all at once. Anxiety, all of these hormones are being released via his experience. All of this stress, all of this cortisol, everything is all happening all at once. And he's screaming, I can't breathe. And yet these liars are claiming that his breathing was just around normal. Well, why was he screaming he can't breathe? And if his breathing was just around normal, then how was Derek Chauvin choking him? I digress. These liars they're not even trying. They just use their title and they lean on people's trust in authority figures, right? Trust in the lab coat, the white coat. They're leaning on the fact that people are stupid enough to say that, oh, okay, well, this person has this title next to their name, so therefore everything that they say is true. No, they're lying, and they're not hiding it. So anyway, this is the Daniel Essenschmidt that said that over 2,000 people arrested for driving under the influence of fentanyl revealed an average concentration of 9.59 that had, basically at or over some significantly under the same dosage of fentanyl that George Floyd had in his system. Well, let me take you back to this document showing very clearly that it wasn't just 11 nanograms, it was 16.6. 16.6. Okay, 15 nanograms would be 5 times the lethal dose. Okay, keep that in mind. So what does it mean that over 2,000 people survived? Does it are you insinuating, or is this doctor insinuating that the average lethal dose is not the 3 nanograms? That actually somebody got it wrong there, that it's not the 3? Because I doubt that they would say that in court. I doubt that they would challenge that notion, right? And when it comes to drugs, other factors always have to be taken into the account on an individual basis. And so when you take all of the factors into the account when it comes to George Floyd's death and the excellent investigative journalism that Candace Owens and her team and the people that she brought on put into this documentary, you can see what is true and what is not true without trying very hard. Okay, and that brings us to Dr. Andrew Baker, who testified at the trial. Dr. Andrew Baker, who he doesn't play the clip from the documentary, but in the documentary, which I highly encourage you to watch, we see Andrew Baker testifying, and he says, if George Floyd was not in the situation that he was in, this would have been a lethal dose. And he's insinuating that the lethal dose didn't kill him. Derek Chauvin murdered him in cold blood. That's what he's insinuating. That yes, I said it was a lethal dose, but I only meant that it was a lethal dose because if he was sitting at home and he did the same amount of drugs, there's a very high chance that he would have died from the drugs. But my story, and I'm sticking to it, is that he didn't die from the drugs. He died from what Derek Chauvin did with his knee on his back. Why does that not make sense, in my opinion? Well, first of all, let me just make sure there's no extra BS that I can pull out of here. The language Baker used to report cause of death was cardiopulmonary arrest, complicating law enforcement subdual. Oh, this is right. This is the guy that did the autopsy. Characterized cardiopulmonary arrest as fancy medical lingo for the heart and lungs stopped, while complicating means occurring in the settling of. Right, and so he did the autopsy by saying the heart and lungs stopped. If your heart and lungs stop because of somebody's knee on your neck for 8 minutes, right, then that would mean that the knee on the neck would be pressing hard enough to stop your breathing for however many minutes that took. In this case, his knee was on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 40-some seconds, almost 9 minutes long, almost 9 minutes of time. Told the jury that Floyd had an enlarged heart that already needed more oxygen and was something by partially blocked arteries. My opinion, law enforcement subdual, restraint, and neck compression was just more than George Floyd could take by virtue of those heart conditions. In another statement, he said the restraint tipped him over the edge. So basically he was basically he's in this report, this liar, right? He's just as bad as the people that the Associated Press likes to highlight, is saying that there was partially blocked arteries that weren't able to get his heart the amount to get oxygen into his lungs, and for those lungs to then supply the oxygen to the arteries, and those arteries and veins and whatnot to bring the oxygen to the heart, which was already enlarged because he had hypertension and another heart disease at the same time, which was severe, right? And he was already dying. So what Derek Chauvin did was tip him over the edge. I'll leave the judgment of that lunacy to you all.
Much in the same way that if you were
Yes. And then there's this claim that much in the same way that if you had diabetes and you had all of these other conditions in your body and then you caught COVID, it was still COVID that killed you. It was still COVID that tipped you over the edge. And so what he's arguing, again, is that Derek Chauvin's knee on George Floyd's neck is what tipped him over the edge. And here's the important part. And what was killing him otherwise was almost 6 times the average lethal dose of one drug, a normal dose of another deadly drug, and 2 forms of heart disease, as well as the adrenaline and the stress of the situation at hand. No, Derek Chauvin's knee did not tip him over the edge. And it's so plain and simple. It's so easy to see. You lose a lot of intelligence points when you fight for the left. You just look stupid. And then he says, except for the fact that he lost consciousness 5 minutes in. First of all, you must not have watched the full footage. He lost consciousness because his body finally started to give out due to the immense amount of drugs in his system, combined with the cortisol and the stress hormones that were firing, as well as the adrenaline that was speeding everything up. All of the factors that stem from his choice to take a lethal amount of drugs.
consciousness.
And if a person has cardiomegaly, their chances of sudden cardiac arrest rise by 150 times.
Except for the fact that there was fucking no evidence that he had a heart attack or anything like that. And by the way,
And then there was no evidence that there was a heart attack or anything like that, he claims. Because of the pressure being applied to his back and neck, basically that Smock said there's no evidence that Floyd had a heart attack or sudden death from that, because his death was caused by gradual decrease of oxygen over several minutes because of the pressure being applied to his back and neck, leaving out the fact that this does not take into account that what the autopsy said, right, was that his heart and lungs stopped. His heart and lungs stopped, and that's what caused the death. And again, they're claiming that is because of this pressure being applied to his back and neck, because that's what the side from the left had to claim. That's what the prosecutors went with for their prosecution of Officer Chauvin. That's what they were using. So yes, that's the lie that they're going to go with, that there's no evidence of a sudden heart attack, and the cause of death was actually what the prosecution says the cause of death was. Because I'm on the side of the prosecution. I am supporting the argument of the prosecution. So I have to say that there was no evidence of a heart attack. Well, there's plenty of evidence, even if there wasn't, there's plenty of evidence of a drug overdose. And it doesn't change the fact that if you do have cardiomegaly, then there's 150 times more risk that you will have a sudden heart attack. And so apparently they just gave in because the drugs finally took their final toll on this man's body, which he was using drugs for a long time. He was a repeat offender. He was under high stress in this situation. He was acting ridiculously with the police officers. He requested to lay down on the ground, and he was already claiming he couldn't breathe when they were trying to get him into the squad car. And he was saying that because he was saying, "I'm claustrophobic. I can't breathe. Can't breathe. Claustrophobic. I'm claustrophobic." When they were trying to get him into the squad car again, and they pulled it. He was in a car when they pulled up on this man. So he's not claustrophobic in that way. He made that up in the midst of his frantic panicking. But yes, this heart attack, right? Sudden death from arrhythmia or heart attack. There may not have been evidence for your traditional heart attack happening, but his heart gave in and his lungs gave in, and there's also no evidence that his heart and lungs gave in because of the pressure being applied by Derek Chauvin, because again, there was no injury that suggested, not even injury in terms of weight on his chest, soft tissue in his chest or his ribs or anything. There was nothing suggesting that this was caused because of the quote unquote pressure being applied to his back and neck. Nothing suggesting that, except for the liar's words saying that there's nothing, saying that they think that's what killed him. That's it. And now let's talk about AP. What is AP? AP stands for Associated Press. See what they're talking about. Associated Press style book growing mouthpiece for leftist language manipulation. Oh boy. For years, the AP, Associated Press, has demonstrated partisan leftism in redefining terms to serve political ends, given its immense influence over journalists and thus the American people. Immense influence over journalists and thus the American people. The Associated Press is in a powerful position to change the way people think about not only language, but what language refers to. In September, the Associated Press said riot should no longer be used. Not only did the agency claim the word was used in the past to stigmatize broad swaths of people protesting against lynching, police brutality, or for racial justice, but it said people should identify the BLM and Antifa rioting and looting as a revolt and uprising, since this indicates broader political dimension. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds extremely biased to me. It's not arguable that's bias. I digress. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So there is no credibility in using the Associated Press and their rating system, if you will, to back up what you're saying or to say that what you're saying has credibility. No, it doesn't. Not only does your whole argument fall apart on pretty much every point that you've presented, but you suck at investigative journalism, and you have no idea about the world that you live in, which again is really sad. It's really sad. Sad that you suck this bad, and it's sad that you don't know what's going on in the world.
Wondering, I just rewatched watched that body cam footage, and I watched the man scream and plead about him needing to breathe for absurdly long. And the fact that y'all just watched somebody he was no angel their way through a documentary and bought it as the truth is fucking crazy. So please do contact me when your entire worldview isn't based off thinly disguised bullshit masquerading as truth. Good day.
Young man, you are lost. Lost in a world where only your opinion and your beliefs and what you want the world to look like matters to you. Unfortunately, you are a part of the biggest problem that's happening in the world of human beings today. That problem being, in short, you are propagandized, and therefore, because you speak publicly, propagandizing. And what propaganda has the power to do is end humanity itself. Why is that? Because when one nuclear power dehumanizes through propaganda another nuclear power, and they go to nuclear war, the human being is destroyed. And yes, that is an extreme ultimate end to human beings that I hope does not come in any generation, in this generation or any generation soon after this one. But this is the reality of who you are right now and what you're doing right now. And you have the opportunity to step up your game when it comes to investigative journalism, to calm down and stop cussing so much with your angry self, and to learn to listen. You have the opportunity to learn to listen. There are people and you don't have to be a conservative. There are people on the conservative side, many of them. In fact, I would argue most of the conservative side of this country has your best interest at heart, not only as just a man, but also as a black man. Most of the conservative side of the field does not play into racist games or try to manipulate information in a way that puts white people on the top of the totem pole and everybody else on the bottom. It's just not true. The only side of the field that perpetuates that lie is your side, the side that you propagandize for. And so I just want to encourage you personally to read conservative literature, to watch conservative channels like the Daily Wire. I'm glad that you somehow saw the movie. Hopefully you supported the movie and you paid for a Daily Wire subscription before making this horrendous TikTok that has absolutely no truth in it whatsoever. But continue to watch Daily Wire content and subscribe to, not even subscribe, download the PragerU app and watch their content. They also have great documentaries, especially ones on poverty. And you also have an opportunity to stop dick riding the left. You can think your own thoughts. You should not stay on the wrong side of history by choice. Right now, it doesn't seem like you have a choice. It seems like the only thing that you know is leftist talking points and a Marxist foundation for your worldview. So if that's all you have, then that's one thing. But with that, you have an opportunity to expand what you know. And to do that, you have to step outside of the box of your own echo chamber. And I encourage you to do that. I used to be a leftist myself, so I'm not guiltless. I was a horrible human being. I was a horrible propagandizer myself for the left, but it was all I knew. Now I know differently. And, you know, yes, I make fun of you throughout this entire thing because you made fun of someone that I really admire, and was disrespectful to a couple people that I admire and I respect. But I don't feel any hatred towards you. I feel hatred towards your leaders, the people who are shoving their information into your head and making you think that you're doing good by spreading what they say is true. Lastly, stop being lazy with your investigative journalism. Yes, a documentary cannot feature all of the parts of all of the pieces of evidence to make a compelling story that people will want to watch. It can provide you with just enough information to get how they got to their conclusions, and then the rest you have to look up yourself. But you also have to look up what is the mission of the sources that I'm getting my information from. And if your argument is that, well, this person, works for the right, but then you can't back up how the right is not something that is objective, then you can't use that argument. I did the same thing, and I said this Associated Press is a pundit for the left, and then I backed up why the left is lying, as well as reminded you that it's the left that's pushing for the mutilation of children via the medical industry, the confusion and hypersexualization of children in both the school systems as well as in Hollywood and Netflix and the news. And you should know that even when it comes to racial issues, it was the Democratic Party that supported slavery, that was the party of the Confederacy, that was the party of the KKK, that fought against the Civil Rights Acts, both of them, that the Democratic, it's the left that wants you to be enslaved, and wants you to provide free labor, and wants you to belong to the state. That's the side that you're on. But when you continue to be lazy with your work, you won't be able to know the truth. So, here's a red pill or a blue pill. Make your choice. Hopefully you choose the red pill and learn how to see the code of the matrix. As for the rest of you, when you see garbage like this on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube, don't be afraid to call it out. Don't be scared to say, hey, this sounds good on the surface, but this is malarkey. This doesn't make sense. And then don't be too lazy to look it up yourself if you feel in your heart that it doesn't make sense. Right? When you look at something like this and you say, I don't have what it takes to off the top of my head argue with this, but I know that it's wrong. Then take the 15 minutes, 2 hours, 2 days, whatever, split up the time over a week, look into it 15 minutes a day, if that's all the time that you have. But spend those 15 minutes a day coming up with your argument for the bullshit that you see on these social media sites put forth, especially when it comes to these videos put forth by these young people who have nothing but passion, anger, resentment, and jealousy in their hearts. When it comes to these videos put on by these jealous young people that are just lost in the sauce and are stuck in their own echo chambers, make sure that you put in the time to at least know the truth for yourself. And if you have the courage, then tell the truth, right? You don't have to start a YouTube channel, but you can just get on any of the other social media sites and either type, right? If it's like Twitter or Facebook or something, you just type that, hey, I saw this and it's not true, and here is what's true. Or you can do some videos, and you can write a book, or you can get together a club of people and encourage somebody in the club to manage, like a Facebook page or something. You can do your part in contributing to the correct side of history, to the righteous side of history, to the side of history that perpetuates justice, fairness, truth, and godliness, right? And live a godly life. So, with that being said, you already know what time it is. It's time for you to take your life back and become your own breakthrough. My name is Xprsn. Feel free to comment. any arguments or supports for what I have presented to you today. I love you. Thank you for being a part of this movement. Hashtag Tell the Truth is the new movement, and there will be more information on that coming soon. I can't wait to interact with you all in the comments, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.
Xprsn.